One of the biggest fears we hear from many people is that they're worried about their money running out before the end of their retirement. And if you're one of those people, then today we're going to calm those fears.
We don't give financial advice, yet we get the question all the time. So today we're excited to bring Lane Martinsen of Martinsen Wealth Management in as our guest. Lane is a world-renowned, nationally renowned.
Let's go world.
We'll go completely worldly renowned speaker, author, YouTuber, and wealth manager. His firm serves clients in all 50 states. It's really great to have you here, Lane. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. It's great to be on your channel.
On your website, emblazoned in big letters, is know all your retirement numbers, aim to live all your retirement dreams. What does that say about you and your firm as a way to start our video today?
Yeah, well, it's really surprising how many people don't know their numbers. They kind of have a gut feeling or they hope, but when you get into retirement, knowing your numbers becomes critical because obviously there's a great risk of running out. Are you spending too much? Are you maybe spending too little, and you actually can spend more? And just you want to know your numbers, and that's really kind of what we do is income planning and specializing in mapping that out for our clients.
So let's unpack that just a little bit. Like, what's the number one financial fear that you consistently hear from your clients? Is it that, oh my God, Lane, I'm going to run out of money, or that I just don't even know what I have?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's surveys that have been done, right, and with retirees, and overwhelmingly and consistently, when they're asked what you worry about the most, that is the number one fear: running out of money. And so, it's a big deal. And most people statistically don't have a good plan. They don't have a good income plan. And so there's really a huge opportunity, I guess I would say, for clients to actually have more peace of mind when they take the time to get a good plan in place.
So your number one thing, I guess, would be to make sure people have some sort of plan, so they get to know their numbers, so they're not just going around hoping and praying that everything's going to be okay.
Right.
We don't know how long we're going to live. We also don't want to live too frugally and then end up having money left over that, if you want to leave money to the kids, that's great. But you want to be able to live, I would think, your best life ever. So it must be kind of a hard balance to figure that out. But that's the kind of work that you do with clients.
Yeah. And so if you kind of envision an image of a mountain, while you're working in your career, you're saving, contributing maybe into 401k plans and IRAs, et cetera. And it's really quite simple as far as, you're saving as much as you can. Hopefully you're saving appropriately and investing well. And when people think of the term retirement planning, they're usually thinking of saving and investing so that you can get to a point where you can actually retire, right? When I think of retirement planning, I'm thinking that's what we call the accumulation years. Of course, that's important. But when you get close to the top of the mountain, or you've already retired perhaps, and you start to look down the other side, it's like you realize we've got 2, maybe 3 decades of living with no earned income.
Mm-hmm.
How is this going to go? And so the planning, what we call it distribution planning, is quite entirely different than the accumulation years, right? You have a whole new set of risks and challenges that you never had to deal with. You have, instead of getting a tax deduction when you're contributing, now you're getting, making withdrawals. What are the tax implications? What about required minimum distributions? What about the timing on Social Security? What about Medicare, Medicaid? How much can we actually spend and have the peace of mind that we can not be stressed out, right? And so it's really a whole different set of issues. And from a financial planning standpoint, it's a whole different set of planning skills to get that coordinated and mapped out appropriately. So
It's really a big switch in your emotional mindset, and we hear this from people that come and talk to us, and then we say, we don't do financial planning, but from the emotional mindset, accumulating wealth, while it's hard over all the years that you're working, from day one in 1987, I walked into the Chubb group of insurance companies, and the first thing was, 401k, and you want, are you going to get into excess, and there's a pension, and I'm like, I don't, I'm 21 years old, I don't know what any of that means, but my mom said sign up for it all, so I
Yeah.
did. So that idea of accumulating wealth is kind of, you have 30 years of experience in it, investing, accumulating, obviously with market volatility and different things, but it's that big step to this deaccumulation of wealth that people really start to get nervous about. And I think for, a lot of our viewers, that is that preparation that they're not ready for, that mindset shift of, can I dip into these savings or 401ks? And kind of leads me to the question of, and how do I tax plan for all of that?
Right. Right. Yeah. Tax planning is surprisingly important in the distribution years because there's, I call them tax triggers, right? And so if you've deferred and deferred and deferred, got all this tax deferral in your retirement accounts, deferred until when, right? Or postponed until when? Until retirement. And so how much of your money, if you look at say your 401k statement or IRAs, and you look at the dollar amount and you tend to look at it and think, well, that's our money, right? That's our nest egg. And the truth is, unfortunately, it's not all yours, right? The government has a lien on that money. And so the question is, well, how much is yours? How much is going to go to the government? And you don't really know because whatever, each year when you take a distribution, it's going to be taxed as ordinary income based on whatever the current tax rates happen to be in that year. So it's subject to change, right? And so there's a variable. And is it easy to map out an income plan when you've got a bunch of variables in the mix? It makes it more challenging, right? And so proactive tax planning. So when people think of tax planning, it's traditionally your accountant or your accounting software. You're basically looking in the rearview mirror, right? It's tax history, and they're saying, okay, well, what was your income? What are the tax implications? Are there any deductions or anything we can do to reduce your taxes this year? That's what's traditional. And so proactive tax planning is saying, well, let's think about not only next year, but the next, 20 to 30 years. That's a whole different perspective. And so it's doing things smart and over time, this position you for a long, a whole retirement potentially of 0% tax or significantly reduced taxes. And that, it's a very real number. It's real savings, real money. I always say if you lose a dollar unnecessarily to taxes, you lose more than a dollar, right? Because you lose the dollars that dollar could have earned you over time. So there's an opportunity cost. And so if we can save and reduce some taxes, which with proactive tax planning, you absolutely can save on future taxes. And there's a huge opportunity cost to that. And so when we look at the numbers over time, if we compare a plan that is kind of by default versus one that's been proactively planned, it's a significant number. We're talking, hundreds of thousands of additional dollars in your pocket because you were proactive.
It's funny. You said something that's just, I can't get it out of my head, that the government has a lien on all the money we've accumulated.
Yeah.
I never really thought of it that way. And, you feel good about your 401k and the market right now. This is November of 2024. It's up from, the last year and a half or so. So you feel good about it. But the lien is going up at the same rate that your assets are going up. It's almost like, this is terrible. So it's interesting that you said that. It also has me thinking, is this the number one thing that financial planners really do to provide service to those that are in the decumulation phase, is tax planning?
Well, that's a great question. Most financial advisors, I would say the large majority, don't even touch taxes.
Really?
Oh yeah, even especially the large firms, all the big names that the Fidelities, the Vanguards. They will say, "Oh no, go talk to your tax guy.
Mhm.
We're just going to invest this money." And that's the traditional approach. And they kind of have blinders on. They're saying, "Well, we're just looking at this," and you've got all these other things. And so that's really what I guess one of the things that makes us unique is holistic planning. And maybe you've heard that term. It's typically
Yes.
kind of in more of a health setting, but we're talking financial holistic planning. And that concept is not this, right? It's looking at the whole thing. It's like, okay, we got all the tools in the toolbox. How do we make this money last? How do we preserve assets? How do we grow assets? And how do we keep most of our money? And there's a lot of pieces in that puzzle. And taxes are a big part of that. You're going to have investment issues, sequence of returns risk, withdrawal rates, healthcare, estate planning, all of those things come into play. Your real estate, strategies around that, if you happen to have a mortgage or not, or so there's a lot of pieces, and when you put them together, it makes a big difference. And that's not typical. Comprehensive, holistic planning and retirement income planning is not common, I would say. That's one of I have a book that this is actually the newest edition. It's just about to come out here
Oh,
in January. It's all about the concept of holistic planning. But
We'll have to get a signed copy of that
yeah.
book.
There you go.
But you're gonna want to take money out, right?
Well, I was gonna ask this before we move on. There are required minimum distributions that come into play, and I guess this is where I see the holistic approach, being so much more thoughtfully planned because I know, I retired at 53, with a pension, 401ks, excess pension, everything you get in large corporate America when you started in the 80s, right? So,
yeah,
like, extrapolate that forward. However, at 53, there's a gap for me of, income. The money's there, but do you know what I mean? Because of this, either minimum distributions, I'm not old enough to get them yet, or once I get old enough to get them, then there's going to be required distributions. Can you talk a little bit about, because we do have some clients that are in this financially independent retiring early phase, and then they see a gap. And then we also have people on the other side of the mountain that say, oh gosh, now I'm being forced to take distributions. I'm not sure when to take them.
right. Yeah, and the rules around RMDs or required minimum distributions have changed recently. So the age that kicks in is now different. It used to be 70 and a half. Then it was bumped to age 72. Now it's, for most people, it's going to be age 73. And for some younger folks, it'll be 75.
Mm.
But what the RMDs do, especially if you've done a good job of saving, and so it's going to be some significant required chunks of money that have to come out every month or each year rather. And it's a very, very tax inefficient when you just kind of accept the default of how it's set up. And because there's tax triggers, right? So based on so all the money that comes out of a retirement account is considered ordinary income or with a pension, right? And it's going to be taxed as if it was just earned that year. Um, it is, it causes it hits tax triggers or certain thresholds. So for example, it, based on the size of that income, it will affect how much you pay for Medicare, right? Does everybody pay the same amount for Medicare, their premiums? No. What's the determining factor? It's the income. And so, boom, it can push up, and you have the IRMA surcharges that kick in. If you have some capital gains, if you have some non-qualified investments, and you have these RMDs kick in, all of a sudden, you're paying more tax on capital gains. And then you have Social Security, for example. Is Social Security taxed? It is taxable. And based on the income, it kicks up. And most everybody who has done even a modest job of saving for retirement is going to have their Social Security benefits taxed. I know there's some political talk of that being changed. That's yet to be seen. But if that does change, it adds $1 trillion of new expense that they're going to have to find somewhere else. So, it's not a real simple problem to solve, but um, so I refer to these as stealth taxes, because you kind of think, well, I kind of know what taxes are doing, and all of a sudden RMDs kick in. All of a sudden, whoa, we have extra tax on this, and we have some extra tax on this, right?
Right.
Well, you mentioned Social Security, and we have a few questions on that. So why don't we jump into that, because we get questions on that. Again, our channel, we don't do anything financial, so it's great having you here today to answer questions like this that our viewers are watching. We want you to drop questions below for Lane. I think he'll be able to go on and maybe answer those, or encourage us to bring him back if you're really enjoying this. But on your YouTube channel, you have quite a few videos on Social Security, and a few in particular talk about what's the best age to file for Social Security. So like, I'm 67. Am I that old?
You are.
And then you talk about 60, 62, 65. Is there a best age to file for Social Security, or does it depend?
Yeah, it absolutely depends. It's surprisingly complex. I mean, it's more complex than the tax code. It's surprising how many different variables there are, and most people don't really know that or think of that. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, I want it, let's go. But just having a good tax strategy, or Social Security strategy, is, again, there's another $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 additional just from a good Social Security strategy. But to answer your question, as far as what's the best age, it's so personalized. There are many times when claiming at the earliest age of 62 is going to make the most sense for certain people. There's going to be times when it makes sense to not do that and to wait. And maybe it's the full retirement age is going to be optimal. There are other scenarios where it absolutely makes sense to push it all the way till age 70. And that's hard for people to get their head around. They just want a simple answer a lot of times. Like, well, which one's the best? I had a tax attorney call me just 2 days ago, and he's this brilliant estate planning tax attorney. And he's like, Lane, I know you talk a lot about Social Security. He says, I got this client asking me, he's a real high net worth guy. And I always, to me, it seems like you just claim early. And anyway, we're talking through it. And it just goes to show, someone like a real experienced tax attorney, estate planning attorney, and he's confused. He's like, this is unbelievable how crazy this is. And so, but based on that guy's situation, I was able to say, in this case, it really should be this. And so it's just, I guess what I would say is, it's just take a little bit of time to really think through it and get the planning done. Actually, on our website, financialfastlane.com, we have a professional Social Security analysis report that we offer. It's like $29, and it's going to give you a whole bunch of data and summarize it for you. So,
we'll put that link below in the notes.
Yeah, because we could definitely use that too. Yeah, for sure. All right, let's pivot a little bit from Social Security. And while we can't look into the future, we can only really look backwards when we think of like market volatility. But we've just been through a big election, a big turn, the House, the Senate, everything. What is the impact of market volatility during your retirement years? And is that higher or lower? I think I know the answer, but I'm not sure I'm right because you're the expert. But, is it higher or lower versus when you're working? And what can you do to buffer that volatility?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, your risk tolerance changes as you get closer to retirement. Yeah, or it should change, right? There's a cost to volatility. So the concept of sequence of returns risk, that's a concept that a lot of people don't really understand, and they've never had to deal with it because in the accumulation years, there is no sequence of returns risk. It doesn't matter what sequence the returns come, the end result is going to be the same. But that completely changes as you get close to retirement and you're in retirement. And it's the concept of, for example, if the market, let's say we had a big market crash like we did during the financial crisis, 2008, 2009, where the market was down 50%. If you were to lose 50% in the market, how long is it going to take, or what kind of a return do you need just to get back to where you were? And mentally, sometimes people think, well, if we are down 50 and we're up 50, we're good. That is not correct, right? If you're down 50 and you're up 50, you're still down 25%. So you need 100% return following a 50% decline just to get back to where you were. Well, how long is it going to take to get 100% return? It might be a decade, right? Or it's certainly not going to be necessarily a quick thing. So that's when you're in your accumulation years, that's fine. But in retirement, if you're taking withdrawals, or you're going to be soon taking withdrawals, now you've added a whole new element to the equation. And so if, let's say in that example, if the market's down 50% and you need income, and now you take a withdrawal, you're down more than 50%, right?
Yeah.
And so now you need more than 100% return just to get back to where you were. And so recovering from market declines in retirement is a whole different thing. And if, depending on the sequence of the returns, which years are up, which years are down, it can, and we run these models all the time. A portfolio can just, run out of surprisingly early. It's like it kind of spins out of control because of a negative sequence of returns. And then you have someone with a positive sequence returns. It's like, boom, they've got $2 extra million at age 90. And it really does make a big difference. And so you have to have a volatility buffer. You can absolutely protect yourself against sequence of returns risk. You just have to understand how it works. You have to have a strategy in place, and you have to know how to use the strategy. But you can pretty much eliminate sequence returns risk with a good plan.
That's such a great answer, and has my head spinning on some of the things you just mentioned.
We should be taking notes for our our accountant.
I'll have to have a one-on-one call with Lane.
Yeah, you might have 2 new clients whether you like it or not.
Can you talk a little bit about long-term care insurance? My parents had it, and it was a godsend for them. My mom got dementia and went into the memory care unit of a nursing home. And my dad, unfortunately, was an alcoholic, but he went into the same home. And when the long-term care insurance kicked in, it was tens of thousands of dollars that was paid for by insurance versus them paying out of pocket. And we have long-term care insurance that we bought probably 10 years ago. So for anyone watching this, I guess if you're 90 years old, it's kind of too late. But is there a certain age when you should do it, and there's a certain age when you're kind of like past that window?
Yeah. So let me just back up a little bit on this. So I think you would agree that when your time comes, that you'd pass peacefully in your sleep, right? You'd have this long independent life, and then the time comes. Unfortunately, 75% of us, it's not going to be like that, right? 75% of us, we lose some independence, and we need care. So this is what, long-term care, whether it's memory issues or a stroke or, all kinds of elements where we're really not independent and we need assistance. So it's important to know that Medicare does not cover long-term care. It's custodial care does not do that. And so when you look at traditional long-term care insurance, now traditional long-term care insurance sounds like that's what you guys have. And if you got it when you were younger, then that was probably a smart thing to do. But there are newer types of solutions. I call them hybrid, the asset-based long-term care solutions. So in the case of, if someone's close to retirement and they're looking at traditional long-term care, it's a pretty expensive type of insurance policy if you can qualify, and the premiums are not guaranteed, and they typically go up and up, and yeah, it's almost like having a second health insurance plan, right? And so a lot of people, when they look at it, it's like, it just doesn't make sense. We're just going to have to roll the dice on this. This is how most people kind of feel. And there's not a lot of insurance carriers that even want to provide long-term care insurance. So it's kind of a difficult area. And so some of these insurance companies, life insurance companies specifically, they've gotten creative, and they've said, well, how about we create this unique type of life insurance where it's designed for long-term care. And so instead of paying a premium for something month after month, year after year, for something you hope you're never going to have to use, instead you put some money into an asset-based plan. You can do it in 1 year, maybe over 5 years or whatever. We just kind of take some assets. If you've got some money to do that, put it in. And then it gives you this nice, strong benefit, tax-free benefit for long-term care should you need it. And then if you don't need it, you can either just take most of your money back if you wanted to, or you die and then it just 100% or more goes to your family. So it's not like you're paying for something you're never going to get. Either you're going to benefit or your family's going to get the money, and you've mitigated a risk.
Is it sheltered in a way? Like you're sheltered from the growth? Is it like tax deferred growth?
Yes. Yeah. So they're based on the trigger for all long-term care policies, including the ones you have, are going to be based on your inability to perform 2 of the 6 activities of daily living, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or a cognitive diagnosis, either of those. And once that you have a doctor says, yeah, they need help with this and this, and that's the trigger. And so you may have, let's say you had a $500,000 policy like this, and you can no longer perform 2 of the 6, or you've got a cognitive issue, then they'll start paying you typically like, let's say 2% of that death benefit per year. So it'd be like $10,000 a month it's going to last for 4 years and tax free. And if you don't use it all, then whatever's left goes to the family. So that's just one example of how that would work, but it's very expensive, right? Long-term, and there's different, a lot of times the type of plan we do is, well, let me say it this way. A lot of the traditional long-term care policies are nursing home policies where you basically got to be all the way into a full nursing home, which nobody wants to go there, right? And so who wants to get excited about, yeah, let's pay for insurance so we can go to a nursing home. But with this other type, they don't care how you use it. So as long as you qualify, so you can stay at home, you can have the nurses come to you. I call it, staying out of the nursing home insurance. And then if you actually need that, then it covers whatever. But anyway. So
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
Hey, let's talk about your book. You published a book several years ago. It's on Amazon and it's doing well, but you have a new book coming out this coming January. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. The original book is called The Holistic Retirement Planning Revolution. And it's really the concept of, it's really revolutionary. I mean, I've been in this industry for a long time, for more than 3 decades. I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot change, and it's really kind of amazing how much has changed. Just not only the economy but also the tools that we have to work with. ETFs, for example, they didn't even exist prior to this century. We have buffered ETFs now where we can control how much of it on the downside. And anyway, there's a lot of new ways to do this type of planning and strategizing that just didn't. The same type of, if we gave the same advice we used to give back in the early 80s or late 80s, early 90s when I started, it would be considered really bad advice today, right? But back then it was great. So it's just a lot has changed. So we talk about how, what are these changes? There's so much tradition and just kind of these rules of thumb that are outdated. And so the holistic approach is saying, look, let's look at all of this. Let's save some money here. Let's save some money here. Let's save some money here. And when we fit these pieces together, it creates a much more stable plan. That's the concept of the book. And then the new book, it's a second edition of that book. We're calling it the 5W Retirement Blueprint. And we're hoping to have this available for pre-order very soon. We're just in the final stages of this, and it's an updated version of that book where we've, because the first book was pre-COVID, the world was different. And so now we've got an updated version. So thank you for asking.
Well, that's exciting. We definitely will put the link. I don't know when this video is going to come out, but we'll have the link to your old book. And then certainly there'll be a link to the new book if it's in there.
Absolutely.
What's the one piece of advice that you would give to everyone who's watching right now, who's going through this video about their financial retirement evolution, or the one biggest tip that you have for people?
The one biggest tip, I would say just get a good written plan that addresses all the aspects of your financial life. And there is synergy that can be created. I refer to it as financial advice a la carte is what most people experience. You go, maybe you're dealing with some insurance issues and you've got an insurance agent that does that. You're doing something with a real estate or a mortgage, and you get some financial advice regarding that transaction. You have an investment account, and you have a tax guy, and it's like, what's the connecting link? It's you. And so, do you know how to connect them in an efficient way? And so, it's going from a transactional mindset to saying, no, let's get this whole thing buttoned up so that someone who's looking at the whole picture and taking into account estate planning. Estate planning is huge. There's so many mistakes that you can make when you don't have a good plan, and surprising number of people don't have estate planning done. They don't have the basic documents that everyone should have, and probate and expensive things that you just don't have to. A little bit of planning goes a long way. Yeah.
Well, for those of you watching, any questions for Lane, put them down below, and look at the links for his book and his upcoming book, and watch this video next to really dig deep into how to live your best life ever in retirement.